Imagine giving everything you have, your time, your loyalty, and your hard work, only to be blindsided by the one person you trusted most. That's exactly what happened when my sister-in-law texted me, "You're too weak. It's my turn now." After years of supporting the family business, this is how she repaid me. I couldn't believe it. In one cold message, everything I had worked for was taken away. This is the story of how betrayal changed everything and forced me to take control of my life. I had always considered myself a loyal person, especially when it came to my family. I had been part of my in-laws' business for over a decade, working alongside my sister-in-law, Emily, and feeling like I was truly contributing to something meaningful. The family bakery was more than just a place of work. It was a part of me. When I first started, it was a small operation, but over time, with everyone pitching in, it had grown into a much larger business. I was proud of how far we had come. I had invested not just my time, but my heart into that place. I poured everything I had into it. Long hours, sleepless nights, missed family events, believing that if I worked hard enough, my efforts would be recognized. But somewhere along the way, I began to notice a shift. Emily and I had always had a good relationship, even though she was more outspoken and ambitious than I was. She was always the one who made the big decisions, who took charge in meetings, and I was happy to support her. She was the face of the business, the one with the big ideas, and I was content to be in the background, handling the day-to-day operations and making sure everything ran smoothly. But recently, something felt off. I started to notice small changes in her behavior. At first, they were easy to ignore. Passing comments here and there, a little less communication than usual, but nothing that screamed trouble. I told myself it was just stress from the business. After all, it was growing rapidly, and with growth came challenges. Still, I couldn't help but feel a distance between us that hadn't been there before. The work meetings, which once felt like collaborative efforts, were starting to feel more like one-sided conversations. Emily would make decisions without consulting me, leaving me in the dark about important changes. At first, I chalked it up to her being overwhelmed, but the signs were there if I was paying close enough attention. Emily, once my partner, now seemed to be pushing me out. It was a slow burn, and I wanted to believe that I was imagining things. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much her actions were affecting me. I had always been the one to keep things running behind the scenes. When clients came in, I was the one who greeted them, made sure they had everything they needed, and kept the bakery organized. Emily would handle the big picture stuff, marketing strategies, partnerships, and expanding the business, but I didn't mind. I was content in my role. But over the past few months, I noticed that the clients who used to call me for updates were now being directed to Emily. I noticed that Emily would take credit for ideas I had contributed to, or worse, she would dismiss my suggestions outright. I felt like I was slowly becoming invisible, like my years of dedication meant nothing to her anymore. It was a feeling I couldn't ignore, and though I tried to push it aside, it started to eat away at me. The turning point came during one of our routine meetings. Emily announced a new direction for the bakery, something she had been working on with investors, without even consulting me. I felt like I had been slapped in the face. I had been working day in and day out to keep the business running smoothly, and here she was making decisions that affected the very future of the company without even asking for my opinion. I tried to speak up to express my concerns about the new direction, but she brushed me off, telling me that I needed to trust her judgment and let her handle it. That was the moment I realized that I was no longer a partner in this business. I was just a bystander. I left that meeting feeling humiliated. I was angry, yes, but more than anything, I was hurt. I had always treated Emily like a sister, someone I trusted implicitly. We had worked side by side for so long, and now it felt like she was shutting me out. But what could I do? I wasn't in charge. I didn't own the business. I had put my life on hold for this bakery, sacrificed my time and energy for years, and now I was being told that my contributions didn't matter. I felt lost, like I had been erased from a place I had given so much to. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling that things were slipping away, but deep down, I knew it wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about something deeper: respect, acknowledgement, and a sense of belonging. I had given Emily my trust and my loyalty, and in return, I was being pushed out. What made it even worse was that I had never asked for recognition. I had never sought the spotlight or tried to take credit for the work I had done. I had always been content with my role, but now it seemed like that wasn't enough. Emily's ambition and desire for control were slowly suffocating me. Despite all of this, I continued to show up every day doing what needed to be done. I told myself that things would get better, that this was just a phase. I didn't want to believe that my relationship with Emily had changed so drastically, but in my heart, I knew that something was wrong. I had spent so many years building this business alongside Emily, believing that we were in it together, but now I was left wondering if I had been fooling myself all along. And then came the text, the message that would change everything. After everything I had done for her, for the business, and for our family, Emily sent me a text that read, "You're too weak. It's my turn now." It was cold. It was final. And in that moment, everything I had believed about my place in the business and in the family came crashing down. The text message from Emily wasn't just a slap in the face, it was a blow to everything I had worked for. It was as if all the years I had spent dedicated to the bakery, all the sacrifices I had made for the sake of our family business, had meant nothing. In that moment, I felt completely lost. How could she do this to me? After all we had been through, how could she just dismiss me so easily without a second thought? The betrayal was far deeper than just the business. It was personal. Emily was not just my sister-in-law, she was family, someone I trusted, someone I believed would always have my back. To hear those words, "You're too weak, it's my turn now," was like a punch to my gut. I didn't know how to process it. I felt blindsided, and more than anything, I felt angry. What hurt the most wasn't just the fact that she had pushed me out of the business. It was how she had done it, through a text. She didn't have the decency to sit down with me face to face, to have a conversation about what was happening. No, she chose the easiest route, sending a cold, heartless message that ripped away any sense of security I had left. It felt as though she was treating me like an outsider, someone whose opinion no longer mattered. As much as I wanted to scream at her, to let her know just how much I had given up for the bakery and for her, I couldn't. The words stuck in my throat as if I was paralyzed by the reality of the situation. I had always believed that our hard work would be acknowledged, that it would eventually pay off, and that I would have a say in the future of the business. But in that moment, it all felt like a lie. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling an overwhelming mix of anger, confusion, and hurt. How had we gotten here? Over the years, I had done everything I could to support Emily, to help her grow the bakery into what it was. I had worked side by side with her, pulling late nights, juggling the stress of keeping things running smoothly. I thought we were partners, that we were both building something we could be proud of together. But now, as I looked at the words she had sent me, I realized how wrong I had been. I had been nothing more than a stepping stone for her, someone she could rely on to do the heavy lifting, while she positioned herself to take control. The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became. Emily had always been the more ambitious one, the one with big ideas and plans for expansion, but I never saw it as a competition. I had my role. She had hers, and together we made a great team. Or at least that's how I thought it worked. I had always told myself that hard work would be rewarded, that loyalty would be recognized, but I was beginning to see that none of that mattered to her. She was playing a different game, one where I wasn't a part of the picture anymore. It was as if all the years of sacrifice I had made had been erased, and I was left with nothing but a cold message and an empty future in the company. I spent days replaying everything in my head, every conversation, every meeting, every moment, where I had put the business first, where I had worked tirelessly to make things better. How had I missed the signs? There were little things I should have noticed earlier. The way Emily had started making decisions without consulting me, the way she had become more and more distant over time. I had tried to brush it off, telling myself that it was just stress or that things were just evolving. But now, I saw it for what it really was. Emily had been positioning herself to take control, and she was willing to throw me aside in the process. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deeply this betrayal ran. It wasn't just about losing my job or being excluded from the business. It was about losing the relationship I thought I had with her. She was my sister-in-law, my family. We'd been through so much together, and I had always been there for her. I had helped her when she needed it, supported her when she doubted herself, and worked tirelessly to make sure the bakery was a success. But now, she was telling me that I wasn't good enough, that I was too weak to be a part of it anymore. The words stung even more because they came from someone I loved and trusted. I couldn't believe how easily she had thrown me out. It felt like everything I had done, everything I had given, was nothing more than a means to an end for her. She had used me to help her build the business, and now that she was in a position to take control, she had no use for me anymore. The more I reflected on everything, the more angry I became. I had sacrificed so much for this family and this business, and it seemed like none of it mattered. I had invested years of my life into something that I thought was bigger than just a business. It was about family, about loyalty. But now I realized it had all been about Emily's ambition. As the days went on, I knew that I couldn't let this go. I couldn't let Emily get away with this, not after everything I had done for her. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew I had to take a step back. I needed to take a hard look at my life and the business. I needed to decide if I was going to continue to fight for something that no longer valued me, or if it was time for me to walk away and find my own path. The decision weighed heavily on me, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just about the bakery anymore. It was about my self-worth, my future, and my ability to take control of my own destiny. The more I thought about what Emily had done, the more I realized that I wasn't going to let her define my worth. I had given so much of myself to that business, but now I needed to think about what was best for me. The decision wasn't going to be easy, but I knew that I had to make it. I wasn't going to stay in a place where I wasn't valued, where my contributions meant nothing. It was time for me to take charge of my own life and move forward, no matter how difficult it was going to be. The days following Emily's text felt like a blur. I had never been so conflicted in my life. On one hand, I was hurt, angry, and completely shocked by her actions. On the other hand, I knew that something had to change. I couldn't just sit around and wait for someone else to decide my future for me. Emily had made it clear. This was her business now, and I was no longer part of the picture. But what did that mean for me? Was I supposed to just accept it? Let go of everything I had worked for? The answer was no. I wasn't going to let her or anyone else take control of my life like this. I needed to take action. But the question was, what was the right move? I started by taking a few days to process everything. I couldn't make any rash decisions. I had worked for years, dedicating my time and energy to the bakery, and I wasn't about to just walk away from all of it without a plan. I spent hours thinking, pacing around my house, questioning everything. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Emily's betrayal had revealed something I had been avoiding for a long time, something bigger than just the family business. It wasn't just about being kicked out of the bakery or being replaced by Emily. It was about how much of myself I had given up in the process. I had spent so much time focusing on the business, on supporting Emily, that I had neglected my own needs, my own desires. It was time for me to figure out who I was outside of the bakery, outside of the role I had played for so many years. The more I reflected on my situation, the more it became clear that I needed a fresh start. I didn't want to keep fighting for a place where I wasn't respected. I didn't want to stay in a toxic environment, constantly fighting for recognition and a seat at the table. I had already given too much of myself to that business, and in the end, it had been taken away from me without a second thought. But instead of wallowing in self-pity, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight to get back into a business that didn't want me. I was going to take control of my own future. I had built my life around the bakery for so long, but now I had the chance to build something new, something that was mine, something that didn't depend on Emily or anyone else. It was time to step out of the shadows and into the light. I started to think about what I wanted. What did I really want to do with my life? What was I passionate about? For the longest time, I had defined myself by my role in the bakery. I was Megan, the hardworking, reliable employee who always showed up and got the job done. But who was I beyond that? What was my true purpose? As I asked myself these questions, the answers slowly started to form. I realized that I had always loved working with people, helping them find solutions, organizing and managing things behind the scenes. Over the years, I had picked up so many skills that I knew could be applied to something else. I didn't have to rely on the bakery to prove my worth. I could start my own venture, one that aligned with my values and gave me the freedom I had been craving. The idea of starting something new was both exciting and terrifying, but as I thought about it, the more I realized that it was the only way forward. I had already given so much to the bakery and to Emily, but now it was time for me to invest in myself. I could create something that was truly mine, that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. I began researching what it would take to start my own business. A consultancy firm where I could use my skills in project management, organization, and people skills to help small businesses grow. It was a leap of faith, but it felt right. This was my chance to take control of my own destiny. The first step was difficult. I had to cut ties with the bakery. I couldn't keep holding on to a place that didn't appreciate me. I had to face Emily and let her know that I was leaving. The conversation wasn't easy. Emily had always been the dominant force in our partnership, and now, as I stood before her, telling her that I was walking away, I could see the surprise in her eyes. She tried to convince me that I was making a mistake, that the business would suffer without me, but I knew deep down that I wasn't making a mistake. I had already suffered too much, and it was time for me to move on. "I'm done, Emily," I said firmly. "I've given everything to this business, and I'm not going to keep fighting for a place here. It's time for me to move on, to find something that values me for who I am, not just what I can do for you." Emily didn't know how to respond. She seemed confused, maybe even a little angry, but I didn't care anymore. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back. I wasn't going to be the person who kept giving to someone who wasn't willing to give back. I wasn't going to let her define my worth any longer. The hardest part of the entire process was letting go of the people I had worked with and the memories I had built over the years. The bakery had been a huge part of my life, and walking away from it felt like I was leaving a piece of myself behind. But I knew that it was the right thing to do. I wasn't just leaving a job, I was leaving behind a part of myself that had been suffocating for too long. In the weeks that followed, I focused on building my new business. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, but I was determined. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, and I wasn't going to stop now. I started small, reaching out to my network, offering consulting services, and slowly building a client base. The more I worked on my new venture, the more I realized that I had made the right decision. This was my chance to build something for myself, without relying on anyone else's approval. Looking back, I realized that Emily's betrayal, painful as it was, had given me the opportunity to break free from the business and start a new chapter. I wasn't just reclaiming my future, I was creating one. It was a difficult road, but with each passing day, I grew stronger and more confident. I had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes the greatest growth comes from the hardest decisions, and now I was finally in control of my own destiny. The moment of truth came when I realized that walking away from the bakery wasn't just about leaving a business, it was about leaving behind a life I had been defined by for so long. When I made the decision to step out, everything seemed uncertain. I was terrified of what would happen next. There was a part of me that doubted my decision, that wondered if I had made a huge mistake. It was the unknown that scared me the most. But despite the fear, I knew deep down that I had to take this leap for my own personal growth and happiness. I started my consulting business slowly, building it from the ground up. My first step was reaching out to people in my network, old colleagues and business partners I had worked with over the years, letting them know that I was available for freelance work. The first few weeks were a mix of excitement and anxiety. It wasn't easy. There were moments of frustration when things didn't go as planned, when I felt like I was putting in all this effort for little return. I questioned my decision constantly, and every new setback made me wonder if I had been too impulsive. It wasn't the smooth ride I had hoped for, and the challenges were real. But slowly, something began to shift. A few small projects turned into larger ones, and with each success, my confidence grew. I wasn't just taking on random jobs, I was building a brand, a name for myself, and that felt incredible. The initial fear of failure started to fade as I realized that I was capable of creating something on my own, something that didn't depend on anyone's approval or validation. This was my business, my vision, and I was determined to see it succeed. Then came the first big breakthrough. A former client from the bakery who had always respected my work approached me with an opportunity, a major marketing project that they had been considering for months. They had heard that I was branching out on my own and wanted to know if I would be interested in taking on the job. I was both thrilled and terrified. This was the kind of opportunity I had always wanted, but it was also a huge responsibility. I couldn't afford to screw this up. The project was complex, high stakes, and required a level of commitment that I had never faced before. I spent days crafting the proposal, pouring my energy into every detail, and refining the marketing strategy. When the client finally agreed to work with me, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. I had done it. I had landed a major client completely on my own. That moment was pivotal. It solidified my belief that I had made the right decision. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, and I was doing it on my own terms. As the project unfolded, I poured everything I had into it. There were long hours, late nights, and moments when I felt completely overwhelmed. But the satisfaction of working on something I believed in, something that was entirely my creation, made it all worth it. I saw the impact my work was having on the client's business, and that validation was like a breath of fresh air. It wasn't about money, it wasn't about recognition. It was about the sense of fulfillment I got from knowing that I had the power to build something that was uniquely mine. But the real turning point came when Emily tried to reach out to me. She texted me one evening, asking if I would meet her for coffee. The message was short, and I wasn't sure what to expect. I had cut ties with her when I left the bakery, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to face her, but I agreed. As I sat across from her at the cafe, I could feel the tension between us. She was still the same Emily, confident, almost too confident, but there was something different about her now. She seemed almost apologetic, as if the weight of her actions had finally hit her. "I know I hurt you," she began, her voice soft. "I didn't handle things the way I should have, and I know it's too late to fix it, but I'm sorry. I've been thinking about everything, about you, about the business. I've realized I made a huge mistake." I listened quietly, not sure how to respond. I wasn't looking for an apology anymore. What I needed wasn't her recognition of the wrong she had done. It was my own peace. I didn't need her to tell me she was sorry to validate my decision. What I had learned in the weeks since I left was that I didn't need anyone's approval to move forward. I had taken control of my life, and that was more than enough. "You're right," I said finally, looking her in the eye. "It's too late for apologies, but I don't need them. I'm fine. I've moved on. And honestly, I think this is for the best. I'm not angry anymore, Emily. I'm just done. I have a life now that doesn't depend on you or the bakery or anything we used to be. I'm building something for myself, and that feels better than anything I could have imagined." The look on her face was a mix of surprise and regret. She didn't expect me to be so calm. She probably thought I would beg for a chance to come back, or that I would need her validation to feel whole again. But I didn't need that. What I had built in the last few weeks had shown me that I was more than capable of succeeding on my own. I was stronger than I ever realized, and nothing, no betrayal, no rejection, could take that away from me. When I left that meeting, I felt lighter than I had in years. It wasn't just because Emily had apologized. It was because I had finally accepted that my worth wasn't tied to anyone or anything. I had found the strength to walk away from a situation that no longer served me. I had taken control of my life, And in doing so, I had finally realized that my success wasn't about the bakery or the approval of others. It was about trusting myself and believing that I could create something meaningful on my own. And from that moment on, I knew my journey had only just begun. The hardest part was over. I had taken the leap, and now there was no turning back. The future was mine to create, and I was ready to see where it would take me. As the weeks turned into months, I started to see the true impact of my decision. Walking away from the bakery, from Emily, from everything I had known, had been one of the hardest things I'd ever done. But now, looking back, I realized that it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It wasn't just about leaving behind a family business. It was about rediscovering myself, reclaiming my independence, and learning that my worth was never defined by the approval of others. In the beginning, there were days when I felt uncertain, unsure of what I had gotten myself into. Starting a new business from scratch is never easy, and the fear of failure crept in more than I cared to admit. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I questioned whether I had made the right choice. But those moments became less frequent as I began to see the fruits of my labor. I had made progress, real progress. My consulting business was growing, and with every new client I signed, I felt a sense of accomplishment that I hadn't experienced in years. Each successful project validated my decision to strike out on my own, and slowly, I began to realize that this was the path I was always meant to take. I spent countless hours building my brand, finding my voice, and reaching out to potential clients. There were times when the road felt long and lonely, but I never gave up. My passion for helping others, for using my skills and expertise to make a real difference, kept me moving forward. I knew I was building something important, not just for my clients, but for myself. For the first time in years, I was truly doing something for me, not for anyone else. I was investing in myself, in my future, and it felt incredibly empowering. I began to reconnect with parts of myself that I had neglected for so long. The long hours I once spent poring over spreadsheets and managing the bakery's day-to-day operations were now replaced with time for my family, for my personal growth. I finally had the space to focus on things that truly mattered: my health, my relationships, and my own sense of happiness. For the first time in ages, I didn't feel like I was constantly running on empty. I had the freedom to make choices that aligned with my values, not just my job title or someone else's expectations. One of the biggest lessons I learned during this time was the importance of setting boundaries. Before, I had allowed myself to be consumed by the needs of the bakery, by the expectations of Emily and the family. I had given so much of myself to the business that I lost sight of who I was outside of it. But as I built my own business, I learned how to prioritize my own needs, to say no when it was necessary, and to protect my time and energy. I realized that no amount of success or recognition was worth sacrificing my well-being. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my life, and that feeling was priceless. I also began to see the power of community. While I had always been focused on the business and my professional relationships, I now saw how important it was to surround myself with people who genuinely supported me, not just because of what I could do for them, but because they cared about me as a person. My family, friends, and even a few colleagues from the bakery became my biggest cheerleaders. Their support gave me the confidence to keep going when things got tough. It reminded me that success isn't just about what you achieve alone. It's about the connections you make along the way and the people who lift you up when you need it most. Through all of this, I learned the importance of forgiveness, not just for others, but for myself. I had spent so much time harboring resentment toward Emily for what she had done to me, but as I moved forward, I realized that holding on to that anger was only holding me back. I didn't need her approval, her apology, or her validation to move on. What I needed was to let go of the past and focus on the future. I had to forgive myself for staying in a situation that no longer served me, for allowing myself to be treated as less than I was worth. But once I did, I felt lighter, freer. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I was finally able to breathe again. The most important lesson I learned, though, was about my own resilience. The old me would have crumbled under the weight of Emily's betrayal, would have tried to fix things, would have tried to earn back a place in the bakery. But the new me, this version of me that had walked away, that had fought for her own happiness, was different. I realized that I had the strength to create the life I wanted, no matter what anyone else thought or said. I didn't need to rely on anyone else's approval to feel worthy. I was worthy simply because I existed, simply because I had the courage to follow my own path, even when it was difficult. As my business grew, so did my confidence. I took on bigger projects, expanded my client base, and even began to consider hiring employees to help me manage the workload. The fear of failure, the fear of not measuring up, was slowly replaced with excitement for what was to come. I had proven to myself that I could succeed on my own, and that realization was more empowering than anything I had ever experienced in my career. And as for Emily, I hadn't heard from her since that fateful text message. I had no intention of reaching out, and I didn't need closure from her. I had moved on from the bakery, from the past, and from the toxic relationship that had once defined me. I was finally in control of my own life, and that was all that mattered. Looking back, it was clear that being forced out of the bakery, being pushed away by Emily, was the turning point I needed. It wasn't just the end of my time in the business, it was the beginning of something much more meaningful. It was the start of my own journey, my own growth, and my own success. I was no longer defined by the bakery, by Emily, or by anyone else. I was defined by the choices I made, the courage I had to walk away, and the strength I found to start fresh. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free.